I play a lot of Football Manager. In fact, I've put thousands of hours into pretty much every installment of the game since I've started playing, and I've made over 500 videos here on YouTube about the game that I love, to the point where it's now my part-time job to play this game. Now in this time, one of the main things I've done has been rebuilding clubs here on my channel, where I take over a club, whether a big one or a small one, try and change their fortunes and deliver success, and as much as each rebuild requires a bit of luck and good transfers and all of that stuff, really, all of the success that I have in each rebuild starts from the very beginning. The foundations that I put in place mean that I can win 5 years later the Champions League and whatnot, and I'm going to reveal my secrets today of exactly what I do to make my rebuilds a success. Now, we'll be creating a new rebuild for this video. As an example, we'll be taking over as FC Nuremberg manager in the second tier of German football, and using this as our example of exactly how I would set up a normal rebuild for all the videos that I do here on the channel. Now, this is a video that you guys have been asking to see for quite a while on the channel, so if you do enjoy it, I really would appreciate you smashing a like button for me and commenting down below any questions you do have. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get right into it, and why I wanted to start with this screen that you're seeing here, where you get your slides about the club you're managing. And I wanted to start here because this is actually where the rebuild starts, in the first step that I'm going to call the learning phase. Because in these first quick slides, we're going to learn everything that we're aiming to achieve with this club, the tactic that we could potentially play, and a bunch of extra information that a lot of people skip past, and this is where I always start. Now, a lot of this stuff is kind of information that won't really mean anything to us. They might have trophies in the past, but for us, that doesn't mean anything. But what I like to see straight away is the media prediction of the club, where we're expected to finish, so 11th place, mid-table. That gives me an idea of where the media predicts our squad to finish, and also I'm taking a look at the facilities and the budgets that we're working with. But really, that media prediction is the first thing that I take note of, because it lets me know where we're going to be aiming this season. Also on this screen, you get an idea about the best tactic according to your assistant that we should potentially play. Now, it seems like a 4-3-3 might suit our players. It's not saying we have to go for that, but we should keep that in mind for later. And then we get the information from the board and the culture of what they want us to achieve in terms of the actual club itself. So developing players using the youth system, and signing German players based in Germany, as well as where they want us to be in this year and in 5 years' time. Now, all of this information, I will say, you can see a little bit later on, but I like to look at it here in this learning phase just to get a quick idea of where the club stands. And that is the easy first step. We know who we're managing, we kind of know what we're working with. But now that we've covered that part, let me show you the first thing that I do when I'm taking over a new club in-game, and that is delegating my responsibilities. So we've just landed as Nuremberg manager, and there's a bunch of stuff you expect that I might go into. Scouting, tactics, no, I skip all of that for now. The first thing I always do is go to the staff section and click this responsibilities button up here, because I'm now going to get rid of anything that I don't want to do here at the club. So for me, that's media. I don't want to do anything to do with the media, so I set my assistant to go and do that for me. Now, you guys can do this whatever way you want. I'm just showing you what I do, but I also go to the staff section and I delegate all staff hires out to someone else, and that goes the same as well for staff contracts too. I'll be delegating that out so I don't have to deal with it. I'm not saying you guys have to do this, it's just something that I don't want to deal with when managing a club in Football Manager. And the same goes for player contracts in my youth teams. I don't want to have to deal with bang average players in the B team, in the reserve team or whatever, and negotiating their deals. I give that over to the director of football, whoever it might be. The main team I keep to myself, but the under 19s and the B team, I'm going to trust someone else to do that for me and sort it out on my behalf. Now, I'm not saying the way that I do rebuilds is perfect in any way. You guys might prefer to do it a different way, and this is just how I like playing the game, but you guys have asked to see it, and for me, that delegating the responsibilities tab is crucial, not just to getting everything working the right way for me, but also getting rid of the boring stuff and keeping me enjoying the game and enjoying the save for longer, so I actually have fun when playing. But now we can move on to the next step, and that for me is making sure we're not losing anyone at the end of their contract. And this will happen in every save you do. When you first start a save, one of the first emails you'll get is a list of players in the last year of their deal and a description as to whether the board expects that we need to sign a new deal with them or not. Now, in this screen, I will always look for any promising youngsters. So these two guys with high potential, I'll go ahead and offer them new deals. The other ones, If it's saying we don't need to worry about it right now, I can at least make my mind up with later. But if there's anyone with one of these green writings next to them suggesting to give him a contract straight away, I'll try and get it done as early as possible. So Lucas Schleimer here, I'll make sure he gets a new deal because he's someone that apparently has the ability to be part of our squad, age 23. The other guys are in their 30s and maybe we don't need them anymore. Some of them have an extension clause as well. So I'll go in straight away and I'll offer this guy a contract and make sure he's sticking around for the long term. But I'm not quite done with contracts just yet though, because with a team like Nuremberg, I want to make sure we're hanging on to our best players for a long time and they don't get stolen from us from under our noses by a bigger club. So I'm not just looking at people whose contract expires this year. I go to the squad section and then I click on this button which filters players based on expiring contracts, and I'll look ahead to the next season at the minimum. So I'll not just be looking at players expiring in 2024, but also 2025 and making a move on them. So Jens Kastrup, for example, he's a high ability player with a lot of potential with only 2 years left in his deal, age 19. I want to make sure he's strapped in for the long term, so I'll go ahead and I'll offer him a new deal. And the reason I do all of this now is to make sure that we don't lose out on any of these players down the line, but also to get that contract money out of my budget. So if I'm giving a new contract to Jens Kastrup, for example, that's going to lower my wage budget, and I don't want to go ahead and start making transfers and then realize I don't have the wages enough to complete the contract renewal of these players that are already at the club. So I get that done first, and then I can move on to the next step, and that's when I start to analyze a squad and taking a look at our best players. So in a team like Nuremberg, I don't exactly know who we're working with or who our best players are, so I go to the same squad screen we were looking at for contracts, and I click the ability button to see who are the best players at the club, because it's these guys who I'm going to want to base everything that we do tactically around, everything we do in the transfer market. We want to be building around these ones for the future. So Jens Kastrup, we know, is a good midfielder. We've got Kanuzen, who is a good attacking midfielder. So I definitely want to have a number 10 in whatever system I play, which is pretty interesting because earlier the game suggested a 4-3-3, and I'm not necessarily sure that would suit Kanuzen, and maybe a 4-2-3-1 will be better. We've got a good left wing back. We've then got another good central midfielder who prefers to defend. So maybe a two-man midfield of Flick and Kastrup with Uzun ahead of them could be important, but I'm not just looking at ability, I'll also look at potential too. Which players do we want to get in the team? We have a young guy here called Hungbo, which is a pretty cool name. He plays on the wing. So now not only am I getting an idea about who our best players are and who we need to work with, but also what tactics we might play, and that will come a little bit later. But whilst I am analysing the squad, I'll always click position and get an idea of how it's laid out. So we have a pretty high number of defenders, but other than that, I think the team is quite well balanced. So maybe there's a few players we can sell on there, but it looks like we suit a back four with wingers, a striker, and a bulky midfield. Now, if I saw we had a ton of centre backs and some wing backs, maybe I'd look at playing 5 at the back, but I think with our best players here being the ones that we already know about, I don't want to play that system. I think we're going to look at a 4-2-3-1. So this is all happening really in the space of about 2 minutes of actual in-game play, where I'm not only just learning about this team for the first time, I've now analysed a squad, I've passed over responsibilities to the staff members, and I've taken a look at which players we want to keep around for the long term contractually, and which we might not be so bothered about. So now that we kind of know who our best players are, we can start to build a tactic. Now for me, I'll be totally honest, I am someone that isn't an Ange Postecoglou kind of manager where I have a tactic and I force everyone to play it. I much prefer, particularly with a team that's an underdog, to make a tactic that suits the players, not make the players suit a tactic just yet. And I think it's very easy to do, because when you go to create a tactic, what I always do is I use one of the presets that the game provides and then I tweak from there. Now the thumbs up on the tactic suggests which ones that the game thinks will work for your team. Fluid counter-attack, route 1, or a gegenpress system. Being a German club, I want a high intensity football style anyway, so for me, I'm going to go for that gegenpress, and then we can go on to choose the formation itself, which whilst it is suggesting a 4-2-4, and the game earlier thought a 4-3-3 could be good, I have seen already that I think the 4-2-3-1 is going to suit our Nuremberg team to the ground. But now it's time to tweak the tactic, and of course depending on what team you manage will depend on how you're going to tweak the tactic itself, but I always start by going to the quick pick button, then going to pick without restriction and pick best 11. 11. So we can bring in the best players into this system, and then I click pick role and duty, because what this will do is then put those best players that we've just put into the team into their best roles in this tactic. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to stick to that, because their best roles might not actually function as an 11, but it gives me an idea of where we might want to really have our stars. So Canuzen is going to be an attack midfielder on the attack duty. I'm fine with that, we can work with it. If I actually look at the defense, I probably don't want to play a libero. I don't really want to play an inverted wing back or anything like that. So I'm going to start shifting the roles back to the ones that I want, but also a mix of the ones that are going to help players out. So like Florian Flick, we know he's a really good ball winning midfielder, so I'm going to leave him on that and allow our best players to flourish and everyone else to do a job around them. And after a few tweaks, this is what I've ended up with in terms of the roles and the shape. And this doesn't have to be what we play with long term, but it gives me something to start building with as we go forward into our transfer section. And you'll see why I always do the tactics first before the transfers, because whilst I could sit here now and tweak the tactic loads, there's no point showing you guys that, because it's all completely dependent on how you want to play and how your team wants to play. But this will determine how we recruit, because in the squad planner, you need a tactic in place to really start working on how your squad is going to be built. So now I move on to the next section, the fun part, squad planning. Now in this early stage, I don't think you really need to get down into the exact details of who you're keeping and who you're selling for the foreseeable future. I think it's just a good idea to find some glaring weaknesses in your team for that first transfer window before you really get to know about your squad, to see if there's any massive holes we need to fill. So I always go to the filter section first, get rid of the second team and under 19 players from our squad planner, and in the dev center I will promote anyone as well that I think looks any good so that we can use them in said squad planner. Once that's done, I go to ask assistant and suggest for everything, and then you get an idea of how many players you've got in each area of the pitch and how well balanced you are. So you can see that actually once you've got a free rating in any area, that means you've got a good level of depth for each position. So maybe we're lacking a bit of depth on the wing in terms of quality, so that might be something that we look into. We've got quite a lot of players, but we're probably missing a winger and maybe missing a midfielder too. We've got a two-man midfield at the base here, but only 3 players that can play there. So already I'm highlighting that going forward in the transfer window, without even knowing who we're keeping and selling, we're going to need a midfielder and we're going to need a winger. So that's going to highlight what I'm looking for in the market. And that moves us nicely into the transfer market section and the scouting part of this video as we get towards the end really of what I do on the first day when rebuilding the club. Now I will say, if anyone wants to see anything specific about how I sign players, sell players, whatever it might be, let me know in the comments so I can hopefully make a follow-up video about that. But in terms of just what I do to rebuild a club, what I do to get started, you're seeing the steps that I do so far, and really some of the things I'm doing here is what's going to set me up for the future of a club. But the scouting part is one of the most important that I think you need to get right at the start of a save, and there's a few different ways that people like to do it. Maybe knowing that we need a central midfielder and a winger, you might send your scouts out looking for that exactly, but I never do it that way. I'm going to show you what I do. So firstly, I'll get rid of any scouting assignments that I think don't serve a club. So scouting players in the 3rd division of German football might be useful in real life, but realistically, I'm never going to be signing anyone from those divisions, and I'd hope the ones that are good enough would rise anyway in the scouting assignments I'm going to set. I'm happy to keep players in our division and the division above, but other than that, I think we're okay to keep some of those assignments for now. But I'm going to go to the scouted player section, and first I need to make it look the way that I want it to look to actually be useful for me going forward. So the club's only scouted 22 players apparently. First I click the recommendation button to bring forward the best ones to the top. I'm then going to click this button here, which will bring through only the players that are interested in joining us, and then I'll click this cog and set it to doubtful to get a few more options. So you can see it's gone up by 4 options of people that might be doubtful but still would join us, whereas beforehand it wasn't set to that, and those players would have been hidden because, you know, it might be a bit harder to convince them to sign, but really that's because they're the better players and the ones that we want. Now if anyone stands out here, I'll be taking a look at them, but I know my budgets aren't very high really at Nuremberg, so a lot of these guys might be for the future, but it's a good idea to get to grips with who could be players that might be transfer targets down the line. But when it comes to scouting, you've got to know what kind of club you want to build. If you want to sign German players, you're obviously going to want to focus your scouting in Germany. For me, I think the best thing to do in any rebuild is to find young players, buy them, sell them on, use that money to upgrade your club and its facilities, and keep progressing that way. It's the fastest way to success in Football Manager, finding those youngsters. So how do I do it all the time? Well, I don't do anything. I leave it up to my scouts after the first day of scouting, because what I do is I set the focus and I let them do it. So I go to recruitment focus, create recruitment focus. I'm then going to go to this button here and select any, because that will then allow us to click any position from tactic and find basically any position on the pitch when we're scouting, as opposed to what you'll normally do, where your tactic will show here and you click this button, it's only going to scout players in them positions. But really, if there's a really good central midfielder that's available, I still want our scouts to find him. So I'm going to make sure that that's selected to any, and then click any position from tactic. I'll then select this to have 2-star starting ability, 4-star potential, an age maximum of 22 or 23. I always go 23, and then I click ongoing, and that's going to be one that runs in the background across the whole world. I don't click a particular area. Throughout the course of this save, my scouts are going to go out and look for players that fit that bill. They're going to bring forward as many of those wonder kids as possible, and it might not be the most efficient way of doing things, but trust me, it gets a job done. If you want to manually send all your scouts across the world to different parts of the world and do the same thing, feel free. But that assignment for me always does the business. And then I set one more where I go to create recruitment focus, the same thing again, go to any position. I want to look for a 3-star minimum player with 3.5-star minimum potential. I then select this age to 26, set it to ongoing, and then further details. I go to contract status and then expiring in 1 year. I want the scouts to bring through as many of those players as possible, because there'll be a point where those guys, their contracts are up. I'll already have the scout reports ready to go, and I'll have some players that I can sign straight away. So I let them scouts run in the background, and in no time, after a few days of simulating, we'll have some names popping up. Now, the longer I do this save for, the more players that will come through on the scout reports, particularly the Wonder Kid one. So don't worry, you might not get the most amazing players straight away. I let them do their thing, and I always get good recommendations. And whilst it might not be the most amazing way to do it, it's how I do it. Minimal effort, maximum reward. So that's what I do to start up a rebuild and set myself as ready to go. So here at Nuremberg now, we've got our scouts going out. We've got our staff knowing what they need to do in a responsibility section. We've also got our squad planner ready and our tactic ready too for the pre-season period, to start practicing that tactic and making any tweaks as we go. With the squad planner, I can now start working out maybe where we have an excess of players and who we could sell on, at which point we'll have some more money, and hopefully by the time we've sold them players on and we've got some money, our scouts will have found a few players to bring into those problem areas of the team that we've already identified, all within the first day of that save. So there you go, that's how I start a rebuild. Hopefully you guys have found it useful. If you want to see any particular videos next, let me know, but this is something that you guys have wanted to see for a while, so hopefully you have enjoyed. Smash the like button, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.